r/AskReddit by Reddify. Americans of Reddit. What is your opinion on switching to the metric system? My persuasive speech in high school speech class was about why we should convert. This was 20 years ago. I got a good grade, but people love multiplying and dividing by 25.4 apparently. Edit. I program CNC for medical device components. Well, over half the drawings I see are metric. Machines are programmed in imperial. Many conversions back and forth between inches and millimeters. It's so freaking annoying. Americans will never accept a foreign ruler. Edit. Thank you all for the upvotes and accolades. I'm fine with it. But a larger priority is getting rid of that damned daylight savings time. The metric system is the official measurement system of the US. It has been since the early 1980s. However, it wasn't actually put into practice because we've already been using the imperial system for so long that changing everything over would cause trouble to the infrastructure. Like someone else already said, it's the equivalent of forcing a new language onto society because it's now the official language of this country. I would ducking love to do that. It is a lot easier to work with. As far as the country as a whole switching, I would be fine with the UK method of using both imperial and metric to save on having to entirely revamping everything. The metric system is the tool of the devil. My car gets 40 rods to the hogshead and that's the way I likes it. What difference does it make when big tape measure is lobbying with tens of dollars to keep inches so they don't have to paint more lines? Not moving an inch. Bald eagle screech. Hey American men. Your peen sounds bigger in centimeters. Conversion happens tomorrow. I reject your false dichotomy that it must be one or the other. We already use metric for science and medicine and such. We use imperial units for a lot of human scale things where they're more useful increments of measure. Anyone that thinks America can't deal with the metric system clearly slept through all their science classes. Americans should switch to metric is just a stupid /r/I am Verismith-esque bandwagon people jump on to feel superior to those they imagine to be the ignorant masses. Anyone that actually is smart, or at least had an education worth a damn, already knows metric, and uses it when appropriate, and doesn't have to make a big deal out of it to compensate for their own insecurities. The US doesn't need to convert to metric in the domains where switching the metric would be any significant improvement. We already did. In the domains where we still use imperial, it's either because imperial is superior for that use case, or because it doesn't really matter one way or the other, and there's no reason to switch. Edit. Since this seems to have blown up, I'm just going to do an edit here, rather than try to reply to everyone independently. Lots of metric crusaders trotting out POERs of tenor EAC to DOM at HW at H exclamation point 1 exclamation point 1 exclamation point 1 exclamation point 1 exclamation point. No hit Sherlock. Metric sacrificed flexibility in exchange for the ease of use in mathematical calculations. But contrary to what the metric fanboys would tell you, imperial units weren't just picked out of a hat at random. They were selected for being useful granularities of measurement for everyday human scale things. In many cases, metric units are less than ideal because they're either too big or too small to be convenient. And they can't invent more scale appropriate units because then it wouldn't be in clean multiples of 10. Imperial used the opposite priorities, pick the most convenient scale appropriate units. The conversion ratios be damned. Which for simple everyday usages makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, how often do you really find yourself needing to convert from one unit to another? Sure, it might be awkward to convert miles per hour to feet per second, or work out how many tablespoons are in a gallon. But when's the last time you had any reason to do that outside of a STEM field? I think the world needs to move to base 12. Problem solved. Reports say a man in CA was mugged, and they beat him within millimeters of his life. I think it's one of those things where on paper it makes sense to use metric. But it'll never happen, because of the trouble to switch. Not only infrastructure wise, but people understanding wise. It would like changing our language, because there is another one that is easier once you learn it. For science. Yes. or 1000 duckine times yes. I'm sick of converting imperial to metric in thermo. Pisses me off. However, the imperial system is so ingrained into everyday life that honestly, I'm more comfortable with it like this. Oh Jesus. This again. I'm a tradesman and machinist regularly working in US standard units and occasionally metric. Each has their strengths and weaknesses depending on what you're trying to do. Most computation is done on a calculator today. So you're just hitting buttons and reading the answer anyway. If you can't figure out how to do whatever task you're doing in both, you probably shouldn't be doing it. The exception to this is estimation, because being accurate at that depends on your familiarity with the system. The people who need to use it, the academic community, already do. But the imperial system is so deeply ingrained in American culture I can't ever see it going away. If there was a real concerted effort by the government and several private enterprises, the NFL, car manufacturers, construction companies and suppliers, then maybe. But it would cost billions of dollars and there is little financial incentive to do so. Even if there were gains to be made in the long run, corporations only seem to look a quarter or two ahead in the long run. In general I wouldn't care, but you'd have to pry my Fahrenheit from my cold, dead hands. C degrees are too big. I would if decimeters were more commonly used, because the gap between meters and centimeters is too much. I don't really care either way. I find it weird that people obsess over it, unless it actually affects your day-to-day life. I see why it's annoying if you're dealing with scientific calculations. What would be the point? What we've got works fine. As a carpenter, no thanks. 1. Groceries. We already have 0.5L, 1L, 2L and even 3L, because fat America, soda bottles. Also, all products on a supermarket shelf have metric units on them. Switching the sizes makes everyone's recipes wrong. So they won't do that. So, basically, it's already done. 2. Science. All science already uses metric units. Done. 3. Drugs. All legal and illegal drugs already use metric units. Done. 4. Building. Buildings are a mishmash. But, freedom. So no matter what you call it, you can't prevent people from continuing to use imperial boards, sockets, etc. 2. Gasoline. Even Europe uses miles per gallon. So clearly that's here to stay no matter what. Could we change all road signs to metric? We could. But what a massive waste of time and money. And speed limits would be weird to get used to. UK didn't change roads, so probably won't happen. 3. Height and weight. Height in centimeters would take getting used to, but I suppose people could within a generation. Also, technically weight in kilograms is actually mass, so that's pretty dubious if you ask me. Would screw up boxing/MMA weight classes, as well as some other things. Plus, even people in metric countries weigh themselves in stones and other measurements that are way stupider than pounds. 7. Temperature. Could we switch to Celsius? We could. But most Americans feel like it isn't as granular and doesn't have the same meaning. 0 is freezing and 100 is boiling sound good. But standard temperatures of 25, 35 and 40 seem not to be granular enough to me. Do it. I'm a member of the Atlanta, Georgia City Council, and I just had a lady try to schedule a meeting with us about officially changing to the metric system for all city functions. She tried to confer with us, but ultimately we wouldn't meet her. Metric system and the ducking international fixed calendar. Would you kindly? 28 days per month. 13 months per year. With one free day just hanging off the calendar as a party day. Yes please. No more guessing the day hit. As a Canadian tradesman, I'm against the US converting to metric. I work in metric and imperial, and 100% prefer talking/thinking in inches instead of centimeters. I find it way easier to approximate measurements and visualize things in fractions. So much easier to say an inch to the left than about 25 millimeters to the left. Working on engines. Service literature for equipment that's been around for decades. Usually in a dirty old paper shop manual is all in inches. It's super confusing doing a valve lash adjustment when you're used to grabbing a 0.020 inch feeler gauge and a stupid European engine calls for a 0.50mm. Go to the lumber yard and get me some 8FT2X4 SVS, get me some 2440 38X89S. They only teach metric in public schools here. It's all fine and dandy because it's easier to learn, but it's honestly a hit measurement system for hands-on type work. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together.